What is going on, everybody? It is your boy Pickin' Fights Tom, back again for another episode of Pickin' Fights. This week we got UFC. I don't know if it's UFC Vegas 129 or UFC Fight Night 225 or what name and nomenclature they're going with, but we got UFC Fight Night Song versus Simón. It's taking place this Saturday, April 29th. Starts at 4 p.m. I'm not sure if that's the main card or if that's the prelims, but either way, it is a decent card. It's one of those cards that, you got to be a little bit more into the sport to be able to know who some of these guys are. But I think there are some pretty interesting matchups that are slated for us, and I'm going to go through them, picking out the notable ones on the prelims and then going through each and every fight on the main card, giving you my picks, best bet, and predictions. Before we get into all of that, I just want to say, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Let us know what you're thinking of the videos. If you're tailing on us anyone and you're fading us on anyone, let us know down there in the comments. And also feel free to shout us out on Twitter, Pickin' Fights. It's in the top left, as well as my handle is right here. So let us know on Twitter what you think. Also, like I said, if you like the video, if you're coming back, if you like some of the picks, if you see the logic that I'm going with, make sure you drop us a like. And if it's your first time here or your 10th time here, if you're not subscribed, make sure you do that. We really do appreciate it. We're on Twitter and Instagram at Pickin' Winners. And, like I said, let us know what you think of the picks. Drop it in the comments. And, if you're a Spotify listener, if you choose to consume podcasts or information while you're driving in the car or while you're doing other things, Spotify and listening to our show on there might be right for you. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and jump into our prelim notables for UFC Fight Night Song versus Simón. So with that being said, I have a couple prelim fights that I wanted to go over. The first of which being the fight between Josh Quinlan and Trey Waters. I found this particularly interesting because Josh Quinlan is a guy who goes out there and he knocks people out. He doesn't have a ton of MMA experience, notated by his 6-0 record. And also some of the guys that he has beaten were, not of the biggest caliber. LFA 0-0-0, 6-3, 3-1. He came back, got a knockout over Logan Urban, and then pissed very hot. Per USADA had to take a suspension, and that was ruled a no contest. Came back and knocked out Jason Witt fairly recently, 6 months ago, and he's going to be back inside of the UFC. He's only 30 years old, 175 pounds, 6 foot, 72-inch reach. He's going to be taking on Trey Waters, who is a recent UFC signee, 28 years old, 168 pounds. Last time he weighed in, it was a week and 1 day ago at LFA to take a belt, I believe, from Jalen Fuller. So he won a belt there and is going to be coming back to, it's really close when typology includes the hours ago that you fought last. So that's pretty interesting there. 6'5", going to be the bigger man with the bigger reach here. Trey Waters, the truth, is going to have a smaller frame. Josh Quinlan, saying that I think at one point he had either popped hot or was about to pop hot, and his fight fell through. So they moved it over to California instead of Vegas, or Vegas from California. I'm not sure exactly which way it went, but to the less strict commission, was able to fight and get a knockout there, and then had another instance where fight was overturned to a no contest. So a couple PEDs, USADA issues for Josh Quinlan. The UFC doing what they can to get this guy in there and fighting. This fight is going to take place at 170 pounds. Like I said, 168.8 is what Trey Waters weighed in most recently. Again, him coming in fighting a week ago, I'm going to be a little bit concerned about that. He did get a knockout. He is a stand-up guy. He does have a bit of grappling in his repertoire. And Josh Quinlan is make no mistake about it. He's going to go out there and he's going to look to finish you. He has shown an ability to be patient, but he also, when he sees that his opponent is hurt, being a little bit newer to the sport, he can rush in there and he can go crazy. I think that Trey Waters may be in certain degrees a little bit more skilled in terms of a technique, but Josh Quinlan is going to have a much bigger power advantage here. Trey Waters might be able to bang up the legs of Josh Quinlan, and we haven't seen him go into the second or the third round. So going a little bit later in the fight could be potentially interesting and sway the fight towards Trey Waters. He is just coming off of a training camp. I'm not exactly sure how soon he knew that this might have been on his horizon following that win. So that's always something to think about. He went through a training camp, won a belt in the LFA. You got to figure maybe he would take a week off, and being that his fight was only a week and a handful of days ago, you don't know how that's going to be getting back into the cage, taking such a heavy training load and then having to, go out, fight, any injuries sustained there, turn around and get ready to fight again. But it's the UFC. You make that call when they call you up. So Trey Waters getting the call. I think I'm going to go with Josh Quinlan in this one. I wouldn't be totally surprised if Trey Waters gets it done, especially in the second and the third. But I would say Josh Quinlan, especially being that it's not his UFC debut. He holds a lot more of the power. He, has been in the UFC. He's known he has a fight coming up. He had a couple fall through prior to this. So I think Trey Waters is going to be able to step in there. And like we said, typically guys on their UFC debuts, they don't do, maybe as well as they would like or we would like them to. So for all those reasons, I'm going with Josh Quinlan, and the votes on Tapology going to back me up here. So I'm going with Josh Quinlan as my first and foremost prelim notable pick. And then moving up, the next fight following that is going to be Cody Durden versus Charles Johnson. Charles Inner G Johnson, coming off of a loss to Ode Osborne, the split decision loss, where he went in there and he didn't look great. It was not a good performance of himself. He still went out there and almost got it done. Speaking of guys on short notice, he is just coming off that win, that TKO ground and pound with Jimmy Flick, where Jimmy Flick didn't look all that great. It was Jimmy Flick's first time back in the cage in quite some time. So Charles Johnson went out there, got that done, looked good doing it, turned around maybe a little bit too soon, and had that loss to Ode Osborne. I think he had some complications going into that fight, whether he was sick or he was ill or he had an injury. Regardless, again, only a month ago, so not great from Charles Johnson, but he's going up against Cody Durden, and Charles Johnson's a guy who, you see him in the way he fights. He's predominantly a stand-up fighter, but he has a good ground game, and he's very active off of his back, and he's really good at standing up too. A lot of times he can get taken down, but he stands right back up. And I think that was some of the reason that we were interested in him with the Jimmy Flick fight, is seeing if Jimmy Flick could be able to get him down after all the time off and being able to hold him down. And he wasn't really able to. Cody Durden, he's a grappler by trade. He's started to fall in love with the hands a little bit. He's going to go in there. He's going to try and take you down, especially at 125 pounds. He's going to have the wrestling advantage. But the real question is he going to be able to hold down Charles Johnson throughout the length of the fight? And I'm going to go with no. I think Charles Johnson's going to be able to get up. I think he's going to be able to land some leg kicks, send some teep kicks out to the body, and really hurt the stamina and the endurance of Cody Durden. I think he's then in the second and the third round, be able to really start piecing him up. And I think because Charles Johnson is very active traditionally. We're in April here. This will be his third, maybe fourth fight of 2023. So Charles Johnson maintaining active. Looking at Cody Durden, it's the first time fighting in 5 months. He did get that win over Carlos Mata, and he's got the knockout win over JP Bays. Takes the loss to Muhammad Mokaev, in which he was just not able to contend on the ground, and then got submitted by Jimmy Flick, being flying arm triangle choke. I think when you look at these two guys' styles on the ground, I think Cody Durden's going to be much more wrestling heavy, and he's going to be able to not necessarily fight off submissions if Charles Johnson goes for them. But again, that's not necessarily Charles Johnson's game. He's going to be a stand-up fighter by trade. So I think if Cody Durden tries to get it down, he may secure some takedowns, especially going later into the fight. Actually, earlier in the fight, he will be able to. I think Cody Durden definitely begins to fade as the time goes on, because he comes out there with a really aggressive first round, trying to get somebody to the ground and trying to beat him up down there. I think Johnson is going to be wise to that, be able to stand up, and even if he doesn't, as the fight goes long, he'll be able to start defending some of those takedowns, get up a little bit easier, and then start to land. I don't think Charles Johnson's going to be a guy who, if Cody Durden takes him down a bunch in the first, you're going to see a big fall off in terms of his energy and his stamina. So in this one, I'm going with Charles Johnson. I think he's going to get it done. I think he may even end up finishing Cody Durden, because of Cody Durden being tired, especially as the fight goes on. So I would go with Charles Johnson, like a second or a third round knockout, potentially even a decision. And we're going down and we're looking at the votes on Tapology. They're agreeing. They're going with decision for Charles Johnson. So those are my first two picks on the card. And my last one, or something I want to highlight, is going to be Natan Levy taking on Pete Rodriguez. Pete Rodriguez is a guy who has fought all over the weight card. You can see obviously looking different here as he did in his first picture, looking a lot more cut in that first picture. He's 5'9", 73-inch reach. His last weight was at 170 pounds. I believe he's even fought at 185. I could be wrong on that. So he's a guy fought at 175, fought at welterweight here at 170, moving down to 55. He's been a guy who's been moving up and down. Can't totally dial in the weight here. He had a last win over Mike Jackson, and that's not a guy who you're going to really tout a win over. The fact that you're going to be thrown Mike Jackson after the loss to Jack Della Maddalena, maybe means that the UFC is looking for you to go in there and do big things. But against Natan Levy, kind of a guy who's been moving up and down the weight class, and Natan Levy, who's a guy who's been kind of a stalwart to a certain extent inside the UFC. Now for 2.5 months here, lost his initial debut to Rafa Garcia, but then got the win over Mike Breeden and Genaro Valdez. I think Natan Levy is going to be able to get it done based off of his comfortability in the weight class, overall striking, and especially as the fight goes on, I think he's going to have a little bit better of the gas tank. But it's a hard one to predict, especially with Pete Rodriguez being 26 years old and having that variability. He was able to get some knockouts at a higher weight class. So moving down to 55, it's going to be interesting to see how much power he has there, how much speed he retains there, and most importantly, what his cardio is going to look like. So this is what I'm going to stay away from in terms of a bet. But I just thought it was particularly interesting watching Pete Rodriguez fight, previously at 170 pounds, or 175, 170, and work his way down to 155. And I believe just his second or third UFC bout here. Very different levels of competition. Jack Della Maddalena got knocked out quite early on. And then obviously Mike Jackson going to knock him out pretty early. It doesn't tell us a lot about him. I think he's going to have a big step up, and I know it's going to be a big step up going from Mike Jackson at 170 to Natan Levy at 155. The speed is going to be different for him, and I think Natan Levy is going to be better on the speed. I don't know if he's necessarily going to be able to put him away, but that cardio and that endurance is something that's going to definitely play a factor in that, in the chin of Pete Rodriguez. So I'm going to be going with Natan Levy, but there's a lot of question marks surrounding Pete Rodriguez and his game here, potentially being able to get it done. This is a new weight class. He is a young fighter, and he is fighting out of the MMA lab. So a pretty good gym as well. Syndicate MMA for Natan Levy. So another, a strong gym there as well. I'm going with Natan Levy in this one. And then for the last fight on the prelims that I want to go into is Martin Boudier versus Jake Collier. A bunch of, Slovak United States, but their last names have that French je ne sais quoi to them. And the reality is for Jake Collier, Jake Collier has just not turned out to be the UFC prospect that he probably had hoped that he would be at one point. You go back and you look at some of his fights here in the UFC. He's definitely been a stalwart. His first fight coming in 2014, it was a loss to Vitor Miranda. Then he got a win. Then he got a loss. Then he got a win. Had a fight canceled. Then he got a loss to Devin Clark. Then he got a win. Then he got 2 fights canceled. Then he lost to Tom Aspinall pretty quickly. Then he got a win over Gon Valente, which is not a great win. A loss to Carlos Felipe, which is not a great loss. A win over Chase Sherman, which is not a great win. Fight fall through with Justin Tafa. Lost to 40-something-year-old Andrei Arlovsky, which doesn't look that bad, but again, it's a 40-year-old heavyweight Andrei Arlovsky. I know he's been around the block, but not necessarily somebody who you want to be losing to. And then obviously taking the ground and pound loss to Chris Barnett. It's just been a slippery slope here for Jake Collier to be able to get it done and have success inside of the UFC. He doesn't have a ton of particular skills. He's not great on the ground. He is not great on the feet. He's pretty lackluster. He doesn't have a ton of power in his hands. He can, if somebody, is less experienced on the ground than him, then he can get it done. Like in this Chase Sherman fight, he can go down there and he can necessarily choke someone out. But again, that's a rear naked choke. It's not necessarily like he's getting somebody with an armbar. Back in his heyday, back in 2016, we're talking 4, 5, 7 years ago, he got a knockout via spinning kick to the body. I just don't think he's got the flexibility and the athleticism to get something like that done. And going against a guy like Martin Boudier, not 100% sure. I've heard it said a lot of different ways. But him coming in here, he's coming off a win over Lukas Bresky. He's got a win over Chris Barnett, which is where Chris Barnett basically just got too tired to finish, as we've seen Chris Barnett do. And that kind of goes back to the style of Jake Collier and being able to get have that loss to Chris Barnett. Lorenzo Hood, he's got some wins coming on the Contender Series and a finish there. So I think just at this point, riding high off of kind of the history that Martin Boudier had, it's not against great competition, but I think Jake Collier isn't going to be great competition either. It's near even. He's a little bit younger. He's going to be a little bit bigger, have a little bit stronger of a frame on him. It's roughly about the same size in terms of the guys, but I think Boudier is going to have a little bit more speed, a lot more athleticism, and a little bit more strength. And I think he's just as good on the feet and can handle himself on the ground up against a caliber opponent like Jake Collier. So I'm not seeing a ton of ways that Jake Collier is going to go out there and get this one done. So I'm going to put the money on Boudier, and I think he's going to get it done. I think he could probably knock out Jake Collier, and you can see the people on Tapology are agreeing with that as well. Being that he's minus 120, I don't think there's any reason to necessarily make this one sweeter because it is heavyweight and you never know what they're going to do. And the level of competition really hasn't been there for Martin either. So it's not like you're going into this and you know that he has a power and for sure has a way that he could finish the fight. So it is a bit of a toss up, but I think there's a lot more riding on the Martin side, and that's where the pick is going to be. So, with that being said, that basically sums up all of the fights that I have and all the bets that I have for the main card or the prelim card. I am going to say that I think the Trey Waters and the Josh Quinlan fight, I think that one absolutely does not go to the distance, does not go to decision. So, that would be something that I would potentially look on placing a bet for. And I'm just realizing now the phantom hand in Josh Quinlan's picture. I guess you could see it now, but when the picture was a little smaller, you can see that you can't really see the arm here. You just see the phantom hand. So found that particularly interesting. So Haley Cowan making, I don't know if it's her UFC debut or just her second fight in the UFC, but highly touted prospect. A lot of people looking forward to her. It's her first actual UFC fight. And you can maybe see why a lot of people were looking forward for Haley Cowan's debut, emphasis on the looking. That being said, we will move on to the main card and get into it. First fight on the main card is Waldo Cortez Acosta taking on Marcos Rogerio de Lima in a battle of who can have more names. I think we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I guess you count that as six names, three apiece, 4 words, good for each of these gentlemen. Waldo Cortez Acosta coming in at the plus 115, underdog minus 140 coming back for Marcos Rogerio de Lima. De Lima's 37 years old. Waldo Cortez Acosta 31. Very similar. Their last time weighing in. Waldo Cortez Acosta going to be the taller, bigger, and longer man in this bout. Waldo Cortez Acosta, salsa boy, he has been in the UFC for just a little bit here, hasn't faced the best competition. He was on the LFA, got 2 wins there against 7-7 guy and Thomas Peterson, who was 5-0 at the time. Been pretty active over the last year. You could say 1 year and 2 months ago, 11 months ago, 7 months, 5 months, 3 months, 4 months, going out there, getting a decision win over Chase Sherman. That's a guy who I would really have liked to see him go out there and finish. So I'm not sure the finishing ability that we're going to see out of Waldo Cortez Acosta. He's a guy who has a boxing style who's going to just go in there and kind of lay that volume on you and lay the punches. He doesn't throw a lot of volume, but he tends to win on that side. And that's what wins him the decision. He's not throwing a ton of powerful punches that's stumbling or staggering opponents, but he is getting the better of exchanges. And, he'll just throw and throw and throw and throw. He won't necessarily land a ton, but he will land the better of the shots, it seems, at least up in compared to his limited competition that he's seen, Jared Vanderaa and Chase Sherman inside of the UFC. As far as Marcos Rogerio de Lima, he's coming off a win 5 months ago where he submitted Andrei Arlovski, which is no small feat, especially considering Andrei Arlovski's been in the game for a while. It'd be one thing maybe to knock him out and after the wars he's taken, but to go out there and submit Andrei Arlovski, it's no small feat, especially at 37 years old yourself. Taking the loss to Blagoy Ivanov, it didn't say a lot about Marcos Rogerio de Lima's ability to stand and be with somebody who's a little bit more tolerable on the feet. He's got the win over Ben Rothwell and Maurice Green, and then the loss to Alexander Romanov. So it seems like there's a level of competition that Marcos Rogerio de Lima cannot really kind of get past at this point in his career. At 37 years old, I'd be a little bit concerned about where he's able to go here. I think Waldo Cortez on the feet, Waldo Cortez Acosta is going to be able to win, like I said, the majority of those exchanges. And when he has been taken down, traditionally, he's been able to get to the fence and get back up. He will spend a little bit of time on the ground. If Rogerio de Lima can get him to the ground and try to have some offensive style of grappling, I think that's where Cortez loses the fight. But ultimately, I think Waldo is going to be able to keep it standing. He's going to be the bigger guy, like I said. He's not going to have as much UFC experience, but it's not like Marcos Rogerio de Lima is the best that the UFC has ever seen. Obviously, this is probably the best he's ever looked. But being in the UFC for a little bit of time here, he's never had, a really strong run. It's been really up and down for him, never getting more than 2 wins in a row. So I think Waldo Cortez Acosta is going to go out there. I think he's going to get the fight. I think he's going to land more of the damaging shots up top. I think you might see Marcos throw a couple of leg kicks in there to try and stop Waldo Cortez Acosta's front moving pressure. I think you may see a couple of takedowns, but ultimately being a little bit of the bigger guy, I think Waldo is not going to spend much time on the ground. And I think this is going to be largely a fairly boring fight. But I think Waldo Cortez Acosta is going to be able to come out on top. And the people on Tapology, they're thinking there actually might be a knockout here. I'm not so confident. I'm going with decision for Cortez Acosta. Moving up the main card, we have Julian Erosa versus Fernando Padilla. Fernando Padilla, last fight was a year and 9 months ago. I think he's been trying to get a fight in the UFC for a little bit now. I could be mistaken on that. Plus 160 underdog, only 26 years old, fighting out of Mexico. A lot of the Mexican fighters have had a lot of success recently, but that's going to be a caveat to the fact that this is his first time inside of the UFC, and traditionally we don't see a lot of success with that. 6'1", 76-inch reach. Same thing coming back for Julian Erosa. Juicy J, 6'1", 74.5-inch reach. Juicy J is going to come from the better gym at Extreme Couture. Both these guys 145 pounds. Juicy J going to have almost a 7, almost 8-year age advantage or disadvantage, depending on how you look at it, over Fernando Padilla. I just want to go back and look real quick and see if Juicy J had a fight fall through, and I'm not seeing it here. So it looks like they were scheduled to fight for a decent amount of time here, full training camps. Julian Erosa, of course, coming off that knockout of Alex Caceres, or that being knocked out by Alex Caceres, should I say. And Julian Erosa is a guy who in the past has been knocked out. He has been known to take a little bit of damage, but he also, having that 74-inch reach, has been known at the 145-pound division, been able to pop out those jabs and be able to be really lanky. He has a long reach, but he also has a really long leg kicks, being able to go the distance with Hakeem Dawodu and getting that decision. He's got the split decision win over Steven Peterson, which, isn't great. The submission over Charles Jourdain, it's of course going to be a Darce choke with those super long arms that I talked about before. And last loss before Alex Caceres, coming against Sung-Woo Choi a little over 2 years ago. So I really like the activity from Julian Erosa. I don't like the fact that he was knocked out just 2 months ago, about 3 months at the time of the fight, and coming back against Fernando Padilla, who, has been known to go out there and, like you see in his last fight a year and a half ago, going out there and getting a win via knockout, especially with elbow, which is a vicious way to knock somebody out and usually takes at least a 6-month recovery period. He's got the decision win over Nate Richardson. He has a loss to Spike Carlisle. And that was took a good amount of time off after that. So, he's got a win over Donald Sanchez in the LFA and Fard Muhammad in Night Cage. So a pretty young resume here for Fernando Padilla, for the reason being, I think Julian Erosa, this is one that's going to be hard to bet on. Typically, I would love this spot here for Julian Erosa coming in again, having the experience he has, having the length he has against a guy who is going to be new to the UFC, pretty young, pretty green. I think Julian Erosa is going to be able to get it done, but I am concerned about the quick turnaround following that knockout. It's just really hard to say. Padilla, like I said, has the ability to finish people, but I think, up against UFC level competition, we might see that diminish a little bit just with the level of power that he's bringing and the speed. There's going to be less of an advantage. There's going to be less of a tactical advantage for him up at these higher promotions. So I think that's going to level the playing field and allow Julian Erosa. He's a guy who I really like his style. I mean, it's a long, wiry style. He puts it on people. He uses his reach sometimes not as good as he could. He could stay a little bit more distant, having that long reach. Like I said, 74 and a half in the 145-pound division. That's going to be, a reach that's going to get you, an ability to stay away from most people. So I'm going to go with Julian Erosa with the caveat that, he is coming into this fight after a quick turnaround after being knocked out. So I would be a little bit concerned in that regard, but I think stylistically, I think he's got the style to be able to match Fernando Padilla, be able to piece him up. I think he's got the experience on his side. And at 33 years old, he's not quite out of his prime yet. As long as his chin can stay with him, I think he's going to get this one done. And look at the people on Tapology. Plenty of people think he's going to get it done. Like I said, not too many by knockout, maybe 62% of the 13 coming in on Padilla. That's what they're concerned about. They're concerned with Julian Erosa's chin holding up. He hasn't traditionally had chin issues, but he has a guy who's been knocked out a bit. So take for that what you will. He's been stumbled and he's came back. I forget which fight it was. I think it was the Dawodu fight or maybe even the Peterson fight, showing that he can get rocked, but he can still stay in there. If you can catch Julian Erosa cold before he gets warmed up, a lot of the times that's when he tends to go out. And I don't know if Padilla is going to go out there and land his best strikes, his most powerful strikes, his most concussive blows in the first 2-3 minutes of the fight before Erosa has a chance to get warmed up. And I think after that point, it shades more and more towards the experience of Erosa. So that's what I'm going with. -190. I think, Honestly, everything is in play here. He could, in the second and the third round, start to pour it on Fernando. Padilla could have a little bit of an adrenaline dump, and Erosa can use, maybe some, some of his experience and overall skill and length to avoid that onslaught of Padilla. And then after that, if Padilla has that adrenaline dump, he can't lift his arms, he's tired, he's this, he's that. I think that's when Erosa can come on, and we've seen Erosa finish people before, so that's definitely in play. If Padilla gets tired and falls to the ground, gets stunned, we've seen Erosa lock up a submission with those long arms, so that's in play. And then obviously neither of those things can happen. We could see Padilla come in there, be very game, lose 3 straight rounds or 2 straight rounds, or a 29-28, lose a decision. So I think everything's in play here at -190. I don't hate the pick on Julian Erosa. So I'm going to go with him at -190. But, Fernando Padilla, not, at a dog, plus 160. There might be something to have with that, especially if you're going to put together maybe an underdog parlay. But I think the far safer bet here is Julian Erosa coming in against the guy who's going to be a UFC newcomer. Moving up to the, well, I don't know if this even has a name. The third fight on the main card, Cody Brundage taking on Roldolfo Veira. Roldolfo Veira coming out of Fusion XL, the black belt hunter, a very cool nickname. His most recent fight 9 months ago against Chris Curtis, where I think he tried 12, maybe even 20 takedown attempts and didn't land any on Chris Curtis. Cody Brundage, I don't think he's going to be the caliber of opponent that Chris Curtis is, even if he does. Even if he is known for his grappling ability. We've seen wins over Dustin Stoltzfus, and where the black belt hunter was able to get a submission there via rear naked choke. He got submitted by Anthony Hernandez, but he's got the wins over Safirbek Safarov and Oscar Pichota. Not too great wins here that you want to be touting against Safirbek Safarov and Oscar. He's got the loss to Anthony Hernandez, which is all right. But again, if you're the black belt hunter and you're going and you're getting submitted, even with a guy like Anthony Hernandez, who's historically been up and down, that's not a great look for you. Coming back, getting the win over Dustin Stoltzfus is fair. And then the loss to Chris Curtis, definitely a step up in competition there. For Cody Brundage, he is the plus 230 moderate underdog fighting out of Colorado, 28 years old, so he's still going to be improving. He's going to be roughly about the same size. When you look at Cody Brundage, his last fight was 3 months ago, coming with that loss to Michal Oleksiejczuk. 3 months off after a knockout at 28 years old. I'm not exactly sure how I feel about that. It's not the worst thing in the world, but it does seem maybe a little bit quick. But at 28 years old, you would hope that you would bounce back, relatively quicker than maybe somebody who's a little bit old and had more concussive blows. Before that, he's got the win over Tresean Gore, and he's got the win over Dalcha Leon Gambula. Leon Gambula not in the UFC anymore. Nick Maximov, he's got the loss to Nick Maximov, potentially on the edge of being in the UFC. And then the last fight before that, 2 years ago, got a win over 4-1 Joseph Cropshot via arm triangle. So Cody Brundage is the guy who's going to go. He's going to try and take you down. He's going to look for the finish. He's going to maybe he won't look for the finish, but he's going to look to lay on top of you, score those points, land blows when he can, and ultimately, if he can lock up a submission, he's not the most talented at doing it, but he definitely is able to do it against lower level competition. I would expect I think it's a 2017 Abu Dhabi Combat Club champion Roldolfo Veira to be able to ward off anything submission based that Cody Brundage is going to be coming back at him with. Again, Anthony Hernandez was able to finish Roldolfo Veira. But this is MMA, not complete submission grappling. I will say that Roldolfo Veira on the ground should be able to thwart anything Cody Brundage has coming back at him. We haven't seen Roldolfo Veira be all that dominant when he's got someone who's very powerful on top, but I think he'll be able to thwart, like I said, whatever Cody Brundage has, and maybe he'll be able to, he'll be able to draw out some of those scrambles and ultimately get Cody Brundage in a situation where he's not in the powerful position and be able to reverse some things, get on top, maybe look for submissions. I don't think there's going to be a ton of striking. This could be one of those fights where, both guys submission offense thwarts each other and this ends up being a striking battle. But ultimately, I'm going to go with Roldolfo Veira. I think he's got the experience on the ground that's going to be able to thwart whatever Cody Brundage has coming back at him. And Cody Brundage, when it comes to standing, he just leaves a lot to be desired. Not that Roldolfo Veira doesn't, but Roldolfo Veira over at Fusion XL from Brazil, they have a lot of really accomplished strikers over there at Fusion XL. So I'm going to be going with Roldolfo Veira to get this one done. At 33 years old, he's ranked 34 in the world, according to Tapology. He's really got to get on his horse if he wants to do anything at 85. And when he's against really, really good grapplers, especially MMA grapplers, he does have an issue, but I don't know if Cody Brundage is going to present that for him here. So looking here's Veira, 83% by submission. I think that's probably fair. I think he's going to go for that. So I'm going with Rodolfo Vieira. I think the submission is probably a fair prop. Depends on how much they're going to give you for that. If they only give you to like 240 or 230, then I think you maybe just take them overall. But if they're going to give you even plus money for that, or somewhere in the ones, I think maybe you take Vieira to get the submission. So that's where I'm on with that fight. And now we can move on to the co-main event. Caio Borralho versus Michael Oleksiejczuk, a guy we talked about in the last fight. Oleksiejczuk has sorry, my breakfast or lunch is coming back. Plus 240 here out of Poland, 28 years old, 186 pounds, 6 foot tall, 74-inch reach. The 5 on in, he has a split decision win over Modestas Bukauskas, which was a good showing. Shamil Gamzatov, which he went out there and he laid a good uppercut on him to get the finish. He took a loss to Justin Jacoby in a fight where it was largely a stand-up battle. He tried to take Dustin down a couple times. He was successful a couple of times, but Jacoby was able to get back up. Jacoby, for whatever reason, wasn't using a lot of leg kicks, which I think could have definitely deterred Michael Oleksiejczuk's style of coming forward. Which is really where he does his best. Knocked out Sam Alvey, as you would expect, 7 months ago, and came back and had the knockout win over Cody Brundage, I think at the very early on in the second round after he was winning the majority of the first. You have Caio Borralho. So just to finish up the book on Michael Oleksiejczuk, he's got strong grappling. He's got a strong right hand. He's going to plot forward. He's not going to do anything too crazy on the feet. He's very boxing heavy with the opportunity to throw low leg kicks and maybe a kick to the body over here and there just to switch up his punches. He'll eventually take you down if the stand-up isn't working. The stand-up is his first and primary weapon, but he can and has shown some ability to take people down and have some success grappling if that's where it has to go, especially if it's up against the cage and win some minutes there, just to tire you out so that he can throw a couple more shots. But he hasn't been known to get a little bit tired as the fight goes on, especially in the end of the second and the third round. If you keep fighting and you are able to thwart some of his takedowns. For Caio Borralho, the natural, 13-1, looking at his last 5, he's got a decision win over Aaron Jeffrey. He knocked out Jesse Murray on the Contender Series, had to fight twice there. And then he had the decision win over Gadzio Margadziev. He had a decision win over Arman Petrosian, the striker. And he had the decision win over Mahmoud Muradov 5 months ago. Caio Borralho is a guy who, even at 6'1" and 75-inch reach, we've seen him go out there and really, have some really good performances and beat people the way that you think they would. You didn't think he would. Like Arman Petrosian, he is a striker, but Arman Petrosian does have some really good grappling, and Caio Borralho was able to take him down and basically be on his back and basically big brother him the whole fight. He's minus 300, which I think is actually a fair price on him because I think he's going to have a solid striking game. I think he'll be able to at least pair with Michael Oleksiejczuk. Oleksiejczuk may win some of the exchanges, but I think overall Caio Borralho is going to be able to get the better of the ground and be able to stand up for himself on the feet. I don't know if there's going to be a finish here, but I think Caio Borralho is definitely going to be able to, if Michael Oleksiejczuk tries to take him down, I think Caio Borralho is going to be way more advanced in the jiu-jitsu to be able to thwart a lot of what's coming back at him from Michael. And I think also just because, of he's got a stronger build to him at 30 years old. I think he's going to have the power advantage. I think he's going to have the speed advantage. And he may even have a bit of a technique advantage too. So I think everything is pointing for me in the favor of Caio Borralho to get this one done. Because of the variety and the unpredictability of how this fight could go, I'm going to take him, just minus 300. As much as it hurts to say, I do feel pretty confident in him against Michael Oleksiejczuk. Like I said, against some of the top level striking competition, Oleksiejczuk has seemed to fade a little bit, whereas Caio Borralho, we've seen him not really have too much of an issue up until this point. He's, obviously dropped a few minutes or hasn't been dominant the entire bit of every single fight. But to his credit, he has been very impressive for the majority of the time spent in the UFC octagon. And there's not really anything about Michael Oleksiejczuk's game that's going to concern me here. He does have a couple of knockouts, like I said, of Sam Alvey and eventually finishing off Cody Brundage. But we've seen a pretty good chin on Caio Borralho. We've seen some good striking on him. And we've seen him, again, be able to use that jiu-jitsu in a very effective way to where I think he's going to be able to get this one done. And we look at Tapology. Tapology's right there with me, 85% on Borralho. A lot are going by decision. If I had to pick a method of if I had to pick a method of how this fight's going to go, I would say by decision. Not just because Tapale is influencing me, but because you have some pretty solid grappling by Michael Oleksiejczuk, and he does have a good chin in and of himself, especially after getting rocked a couple of times. I think at the beginning of the second round by Dustin Jacoby. Dustin Jacoby went and he swarmed him, and he was able to fight that off. He was still on his back foot, but was able to land a punch every here and there to really stop Dustin Jacoby from getting all that momentum going and landing a bunch of onslaughting shots. And I think he'll be able to do that here if he gets stunned too. So I think Kai Borralho maybe at that point would take him down and try to lock up a submission. Maybe the first or second round, he goes after that. Later on, he realized even though that he's really good on the ground, that Oleksiejczuk is, grappling heavily enough to be able to thwart his offense, and he's having success on the feet, and he might go there even if he's changing shots. So it's really unpredictable, but I think that neither of these guys have a terrible chin issue, and I think they both have good enough grappling where we're probably not going to see a submission. So I'm going to go Kai Borralho, 29-28 or a 30-27 decision here. And moving up to the main event, this is a fight that has been moved off of this past week's card so they can put it on this card as the main event after what was it? Arman Sarukian and Renato Moicano fell out. That one was really disappointing because I loved watching Renato Moicano fight. So Arman Sarukian, I think he's looking for another opponent. I think there was a period of time where he was potentially going to take on Beneil Dariush at UFC 288 in Newark. Ends up that Beneil's going to be taking on Beneil's not going to be taking on anybody. He's going to be taking on Charles after they wait a month because just something about Charles' injury could be fixed inside of a month. Nevertheless, we get the benefit of seeing Song Yadong in a main event spot here against Ricky Simón. I believe it's their first main event for both of them. No, it's not. I think Song Yadong lost. He was in his first main event against Corey Sandhagen, in which he stopped because of the cut. I don't think Ricky Simón's going to be throwing the elbows in the way that Corey Sandhagen is. He's definitely not as long as Corey Sandhagen is, so I don't think Song Yadong is going to have to worry about that. And Song has some real power in his hands. There was a couple instances in the first round of that Corey Sandhagen fight where he was stumbling Sandhagen, especially after the clinch exchanges, where normally you'll see Sandhagen leave with like an elbow or something, but Song was cracking him with the left hand, and you would see Sandhagen kind of take that on the chin and stumble a bit. And then he would go back in and try to go for the takedown. I don't think he actually even got a full takedown on Song Yadong, and Song Yadong is a guy who traditionally has good takedown defense. He's plus 110 here, so slight underdog, but he is only 25 years old, and there's not going to be a too big of a reach disadvantage here. Only about 70 inches here for Ricky Simón and about 67 for Song Yadong. Coming out of Team Alpha Male, obviously headed by Uriah Faber, who is a guy who has a win over Ricky Simón. So I'm thinking that may play beneficial to the Song Yadong Kung Fu Kid camp. Looking at his 5-on-in, his most recent fight, he had that doctor stoppage loss to Corey Sandhagen, but he looked pretty good, especially in the stand-up there. He was able to thwart some takedowns from Corey Sandhagen, who we saw, do well against Chito Vera as well. So he's got the win over Marlon Moraes. He's got a win over Julio Arce. He's got a split decision win over Casey Kenny, and he's got a decision loss to Kyler Phillips 2 years ago. So, you're talking about a kid who was 23 years old and just turned 23 at that point, right? 2 years and 1 month ago, he's 25 and 4 months. So he was 23 and 3 months old, super, super young. We're seeing Song Yadong grow up right in the UFC, and he's facing top-level contenders. And right now, being 5 years younger than Ricky Simón, who's a top-level contender, is going to be a really, really good fight. Ricky Simón, 5-on-in, 5 all wins. Again, he has a split decision win over against Ray Borg. He had a submission over Gaetano Perillo. He has the decision win over Brian Kelleher. He's got the knockout of Rafael Assunção. He's got the submission of Jack Shore, which I think is his crowning win inside of the UFC. Jack Shore, a real up-and-coming contender, being able to go out there and beat Jack Shore at his own game. Now, granted, Ricky Simón has a lot more muscle on him than Jack Shore, but Jack Shore, we've seen him take a lot of damage. We've seen him give out a lot of damage, and we've seen him, really excel on the ground. So for Ricky Simón to go out there and have his way with a guy like Jack Shore, it really shows what level Ricky Simón is on. But Ricky Simón, even though he's got some solid striking, he's going to try and strike in order to get in close. He's going to try and take you down and beat you up on the ground. Looking back through, and we can even look at Ricky Simon's profile page here. He's got 30% of his wins. 6 of them are by KO, TKO. Only 1 inside of the UFC, 3 subs in the UFC, and 4 decisions. His last KO, like I said, is coming against Rafael Assunção. And that was back in 2021. Rafael Assunção 40 now, so it was an aging Rafael Assunção that he got that knockout over. So we're definitely going to see a power discrepancy here in the favor of Song Yadong when it comes to striking. Song Yadong is also extremely fast. Corey Sandhagen was saying that Song Yadong is very fast and hits very hard. And he really likes how Song Yadong is progressing at 25 years old at the team alpha male out there. And I think Ricky Simón probably is going to be able to get Song Yadong down for a period of time. Is he going to be able to get Song Yadong down repeatedly? Is he going to be able to hold Song Yadong down? Because historically, Ricky Simón is a guy who has a ton of takedowns inside of the UFC, but he hasn't been able to hold takedowns over everybody inside of the UFC. And I think that's going to be really where this fight is going to lend itself to Song Yadong a little bit. I think this is Ricky Simon's 5th. I think it's his first, but it is his first 5-round fight. I just want to go back through. At least it's his first inside of the UFC. Oh, no, I'm totally wrong. Or no, I'm not wrong. Jesus Christ, this is all over the place. Jack Shore, it was a 3-round fight. Rafael Assunção, 3-round fight. Brian Kelleher, 3-round fight. None before that were going to be 5-rounders. He's got the one to Rob Font, which is another 3-rounder. 3 5-minute rounds with Uriah Faber. Rada Yaya, 3 5-minute rounds. So we're not going to find them all down here. It depends on had any 5-rounders outside of the UFC, and if they did. So he had a 5-rounder in Titan FC back in 2016. Was his only experience with 5-rounders. Whereas Song Yadong, we've seen him headline a card before. We've seen him go 5 rounds with Corey Sandhagen, who's a guy who, in his most recent fight, just absolutely annihilated Marlon Chito Vera, who was a guy who looked like a world beater in a lot of cases anyway. So that 5-round, and especially going through that 4th and being ready to fight that 5th, I like the 5-round. I think it definitely plays itself to Song Yadong a lot more than it does to Ricky Simón, especially considering Ricky Simon's, he's got really good pace and really good endurance, but again, you can only keep that up for so long. And with him getting into the, third, in the middle of the 2nd and into the 3rd round, we have seen him get a little bit tired. And then having to keep that pace up against a guy who's so proven like Song Yadong, you're going to be able to continue to throw power and continue to throw speed and continue to keep that fight IQ and continuing to get better and continuing to be at a really great gym. I think plus money for Song Yadong here is a great spot. It's a tough one to call because it's really going to matter. Is Ricky Simón going to be able to take Song Yadong down? Probably. Is Song Yadong going to be able to get back up? Also, probably. If he isn't, and Ricky Simón is able to hold Song Yadong down and beat him up on the ground, especially if it takes 1, 2, maybe 3 rounds, I think you could definitely see it sway to Ricky Simon's side here. But even with that, that's going to be tiring to Ricky Simón to keep Song Yadong down on the floor for 5 straight rounds. And he's going to have to avoid that big power and that speed coming back, and the fact that Song Yadong is going to be able to get back up if he even gets taken down in the first place. He's got some pretty strong takedown defense of himself. And then you add in the fact that he's training with Uriah Faber. And there's not a huge size discrepancy. In fact, Song Yadong is going to be, he's going to be the taller guy, but he's going to have a 3-inch reach disadvantage here. So he's going to have to get in a little close on Ricky Simón. But I think Song Yadong has the skills, especially the knees. And I think his overall standing, striking ability is going to be much more improved, in his lethality from the stand-up, and his power and ability to knock people out is going to be much higher than Ricky Simon's. Ricky Simón is going to really be looking to lay down and be able to lay on Song and land some pressure from the top. I don't think he's going to be able to submit him either. So I think there's just a lot more ways that Song Yadong can get it done. So I'm going to be going with the underdog Song Yadong here. Looking at Tapology, 42% are on Song, with 67% thinking he actually might get a knockout. I think Song Yadong, knockout or decision, plus 110, that might get you plus 120, plus 130. I really don't see him submitting Ricky Simón in any way. So I think that could be a good one for you. You could also maybe do Song Yadong decision, no bet, or Song Yadong by KO decision, no bet, because again, as you get in the later rounds, as Ricky Simón gets tired in the fourth and the fifth round, Song Yadong still hitting with power. You could potentially see someone get finished at that point too. So I think Song Yadong is just a lot more proven, especially in 5-rounders. I think his takedown defense is proven. I think his ability to get up off the ground is proven. And I think his power and his speed is proven and had been spoken for already. All things that we can't say about Ricky Simón. And I hate betting against Ricky Simón because I think I've done it a couple of times now, and judging, and you can see right here, hasn't worked out well for me. It's worked out better for him. But, I think a young up-and-comer in Song Yadong having that knockout ability that Jack Short can put you away too, but I think Song Yadong being faster, having a little bit more experience inside of the UFC, and just looking at the level of competition that Song's been able to get past, especially in Corey Sandhagen. And by get past, I mean contend with, have a good fight with. He was losing against Corey Sandhagen, but it was a very close, tightly contested match, and we know where Corey Sandhagen is. So I think by process of elimination, we can know where Song Yadong's striking's at, and it just going to be much better than Ricky Simón. Props to Ricky Simón if he can go out there and he can get this one done. He absolutely deserves to be top tier, top echelon in the 135-pound division. 135, 145, obviously 155, all stacked at this point. So really interesting to see what they're going to do here. But the pick is going to be on Song Yadong to get this one done in the 5-rounder, potentially by knockout or by decision. So with that being said, I will get us into our pick rundown. But before I do that, I just want to say one more time to everybody watching, if you made it this far in the video, we do appreciate you. If you can, drop us a like. We get, between 50 and sometimes 200 views on a video, but rarely do we get above 8 likes. Do us a favor, drop us a like. We do appreciate it. If you're watching the video, just hit that like button. It doesn't cost you anything. And speaking of things that don't cost you anything but sound like they do, subscribe. I call them subscriptions. That's wrong. Just subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything. We do appreciate it. It does help out the channel. So if there's any money we're winning for you, if you're losing money on us, let us know. We want to hear from you and understand maybe where we're doing good, where we're doing bad. Most recently, I think I went 5-3. Had Bobby Green winning, but obviously that one's not going to count. We had a couple upsets here and there that I thought was going to go one way and they went another. We were really close to, having a really good win percentage, but 5-3, you'll take that. So like I said, if we're doing good, let us know. If we're doing bad, let us know. But if you're watching the videos, especially if you're watching it consistently, drop a like, tap out or KO that subscribe button. We really, really do appreciate it. And with that being said, it's time for our pick rundown. All right. So for the pick rundown, starting at the bottom, this is going to be a close fight. This is going to be an interesting fight because Haley's hot. Stephanie Egger and Irene Alexieva. I think some people could, be shocked that there's going to be a decision there. But the fights that I'm going to actually bet on, I'm going to take Josh Quinlan to get it done over Trey Waters. Trey Waters is fought just over a week ago, and Josh Quinlan is probably on steroids. Charles Energy Johnson is going to get it done over Cody Durden. I think he's got the ability to get up and has a better standing ability. Natan Levy, I think, is going to get done over Pete Rodriguez. Martin Boudet is going to get it done over Jake Collier. I think Waldo Cortez Acosta is getting it done over Marcos Rogerio de Lima in a battle of how long can my name be. Julian Erosa, I think, gets it done over UFC newcomer Fernando Padilla. Rodolfo Veira, I think, is going to get the win over Cody Brundage. Kai Borralho is going to get the win over Michael Oleksiejczuk. Song Yadong going to get the win over Ricky Simón. I feel really good about all of these picks. So naturally, a couple of them are going to fall through. I think we have a couple underdogs on there, a couple very even lines that you might be able to parlay together. You might be able to take straight. Been trying to take straight, been in and out, coming up a few units ahead. So, please make sure you track my bets, keep me honest. But other than that, that's all I got for you. This is our last pick and fights video before UFC 288, which is taking place in Newark, New Jersey, that Keith and I will both be going to. We're super excited about that. Make sure you stay tuned for all of the great content that we're going to be bringing you on that. And with that being said, like I said, one more time, if you could just drop a like and subscribe, let us know what you think. Drop a comment on the video. It's also available on Twitter, as well as on Spotify. So with that being said, appreciate you guys tuning in one more time, and you have a great rest of your Monday.